Hey, everybody. This episode of Our Kids Play Hockey is brought to you by our title sponsor, NHL Sense Arena. Look, we all want our kids to succeed in hockey, but let's face it, finding training that's both effective and enjoyable can be a real challenge, and not to mention expensive and a total drain on time, especially if you have to drive to the rink, pay a private instructor. There's so many reasons that money gets spent on this game. But that's where NHL Sense Arena steps in. It's a virtual reality training game that brings the rink into your home that takes off-ice training to a new reality. It's designed to improve hockey sense and IQ, something that's lacking majorly in the game today for both players and goalies. And you get unlimited access to over 100 drills and training plans from top coaches and players that can be played anytime, anywhere, with drills approved by USA Hockey player and goalie development directors. Look, improving mental hockey skills at home has really never been more fun, and any hockey player that uses this is going to have a blast. All right. I've used this before on my own, and it feels like you're so immersed in an arena, you sometimes forget you have a headset on. And again, it's not being on the ice, but it allows you to work on some of these skill sets like scanning, as I said before, hockey IQ, looking around the rink, making the right plays, that getting those repetitions in now as a hockey player are super important for your development. So NHL Sense Arena is giving all the listeners an exclusive offer for $50 off an annual plan when you use our code Hockey Never Stops at checkout. Again, that's Hockey Never Stops. All you got to do is go to hockey.sensearena.com. Again, that's hockey.sensearena.com. Use the code Hockey Never Stops, and you'll save $50 on your annual plan of NHL Sense Arena. Make sure to check that out and enjoy this episode of Our Kids Play Hockey. Hey everybody, it's Lee. Today we have an NHLer, a Olympian, a World Junior Champion, but above all, a great human being. Adrien Plavsic joins us today on Our Kids Play Hockey. He played for Team Canada. He also had a lengthy NHL career and then a career in Switzerland in the Pro League over there. We touch on everything from the experience of going to play Division I college and Olympics and World Junior Championships within a few-year period, all the way to his life today, which is really focused on the mental fitness and well-being of everybody. But we talk about specifically, obviously, youth athletes and hockey and his life and journey through the game. It's a fantastic episode, so make sure you check it out. Also, I'm really excited to finally let you know our new website, game7group.com, is up. If you are a parent or a coach or even a business owner looking to do some team building this season, or for the year coming up, we have now put that all together on game7group.com, where you can get a 15-minute call to look at your business with us, and you can do everything from a one-day Zoom session to an in-person session to a year-long thing if you want to. But as you know, team building is an incredibly important part of success. The teams that win do it, and we have worked with a lot of teams that have won. So if you're looking to improve your team for this year or this fall, whether it's sports, business, nonprofit, medical, anything, head over to game7group.com right now. Book that 15-minute meeting with me, and we can go over the plans for the future and how to get your team to where you want them to be this year or this season. But without further ado, let's jump into this episode with Adrien Plavsic on Our Kids Play Hockey. Hello, hockey friends and families around the world, and welcome to another edition of Our Kids Play Hockey. I'm Lee Elias with Christy Casciano Burns in Syracuse, and Mike Benelli, who's out in Norway right now, and we are joined today by a former collegiate, pro, and Olympic defenseman who played for UNH before skating through an 8-year NHL career before moving to the Swiss National League for another 11 years, where he currently resides. He's joining us from Switzerland today. His resume also includes the highly coveted World Junior Championship gold in 1990 and an Olympic appearance where he won a silver medal with Team Canada in 1992. Following several years coaching after his playing days, today he's a dedicated life coach, which in his own words supports high-level achievers and helps them find ultimate success by matching their vision and goals with their innermost essence. We are absolutely going to dive into that and how it applies to your kid today. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Adrien Plavsic to the show. Adrien, welcome to Our Kids Play Hockey.
Yay. That was good intro.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to, sharing my experience and what I'm doing now and really trying to make a difference. The things that I learned, hockey when I played was so much different. And I think today we have so much information and resources. So I'd love to share and hopefully give something back that, kids can use, parents can use as well. So I'm looking forward to it.
I'm looking forward to it too. So Adrien, one of the funny parts about being the host of this show is I want to dive right into the mental health and the mental fitness stuff and pick your brain about that. But I know that our audience always loves a little bit of background and a little bit of hockey before we dive into the mental stuff behind the hockey. So I'm actually have a very specific question for you that probably will allow you to do both. But I want to focus in on your college and World Junior and Olympic time period. That was a lot of heavy hockey in a short amount of time. So can you tell us about that process, both from a hockey standpoint and a mental standpoint of that, several years of your life? Because suddenly you're on a Division I collegiate stage, then you're on the world stage, both junior and Olympics. I mean, that is not little things there. That is for Canada amongst other teams. And then you win, if I'm not mistaken, your gold medal in the World Junior Championship was the first time that it happened in a while. And then your Olympic silver, it hadn't happened in decades, correct?
Yeah, I'm not sure how far back with the Olympics. So we have silver medal. Thing interesting in '92 in Albertville was the NHL players were not available, so they've kind of changed. Some years allowed it,
Right.
and others not. So we had, like a lot of guys had opportunities, but we still had some pretty amazing players. Like Lindros was coming into his career, so he was part of our team. So we had some really amazing players. I think for me, I think the age was 15, 16, where I just really took off, so my parents came from the former Yugoslavia, and so hockey was not, part of that culture really. Sorry about that. So I grew up playing soccer and hockey, and I just knew, like, watching Hockey Night in Canada, that, as a 10, 12-year-old, said, this is what I want to do. So I spent my days either playing street hockey, being, organized hockey, but we had the outdoor rinks because Montreal was really cold. So all the tennis courts were turned into rinks. And I was like, I was out there all the time. I think that was what eventually, is someone who was average in the beginning, all of a sudden I just took off, like around 14. And it happened so fast, it happened so fast. Midget people started noticing me. And then I was, predicted to go, fairly high. I had a scholarship, where that's what I decided. UNH offered me a scholarship for 4 years, ended up staying a year. And, it just happened so fast. You're just playing. And then, there's a lot to take in. And my parents were not at all, like, they didn't know much about hockey, and having to decide for agents and this, I wish I would have had a little bit more support and a little bit more guidance and mentorship. I think that is so important for, someone, going from, a real simple life into the limelight, because you're just thrown in. And so I think in one way it was overwhelming, but you do what you do. And, I got to, a certain level, that I got to experience the highest league, the NHL, the Olympic Games. So I'm proud of my accomplishments. I know I left some on the table, and this is kind of what I want to share, today with young kids. Really understand how can you optimize, in terms of having the best experience, but also, reaching your potential, which everybody's different. Some are slow learners, some start slow, are late bloomers, others are, really good at the start.
And we're going to dive more into that. I was just
Right.
curious, do you have like a favorite memory in the NHL that you could share?
Well, I think what stands out is '92, the Olympics. When I came back, I came back for the last 16 games, played for the Vancouver Canucks. I was drafted by St. Louis, but was, traded. I think was my first year. I was traded to Vancouver. And honestly, I got back and I thought the game was slow in the NHL. So because we played on, the big rinks and, the Russians, all these teams skated really well. And last 16 games, I was a defenseman. I love to play offensively. So my childhood heroes were even Bobby Orr. I didn't really see him, but everybody knew he revolutionized the game. But I love Coffee, the way he skated, and Ray Borg. So, getting points, skating up in the play. I ended up, with I think 11 points in 16 games for the Canucks in the stretch, and then had an amazing playoffs. And that's when I signed my one-way ticket into the NHL, because most guys, unless you're first round pick and they see you as a solid NHLer, not everybody gets the one way when I played right off the bat. So like that's where I felt I kind of really stepped in and I said, wow, this is what is possible for me. And same thing in the playoffs. I was, 8 points in 12 games, something around that. So for a D-man, and I was just I just felt I was in a zone. And yeah, that was the most memorable, time, because I just kind of had that breakthrough that, every young player is looking to create for himself.
One thing I want to note here, and we try and find common themes in these episodes, Adrien, is you said that 14 to 16 age period is like when you made that decision, if you will, like kind of more of a passion decision of, hey, I love this, right? And it kind of echoes this theme. I'm not knocking youth development in the sense of that's hockey today. We start kids young, but it just goes to prove that the drive and the passion has to be there. If that is not there, it's not going to happen for you, your kid, or anybody in between. And you cannot take that and put it in a kid. It has to organically develop, and then you can help them culture it. You can encourage them. The other thing too is it shows you again on a physical side that 14 to 16 is that time period where athletes really become athletes. There's no 9-year-old that I can look at, or Mike can look at, or Christy can look at, or anybody can look at and say that 9-year-old is going to be the next. I'll use Eric Lindros because you said it, right? Or Connor Bedard, or whatever you want to say, right? This process is not set, and that age time, that 14 to 16 is a really critical time. And if you haven't built up a passion for the game, and you haven't built up good physical and mental strategies within your kid at that point, that's also the burnout age. Mike, am I right? Like 14 to 16 is where we start to see the second cliff after kind of squirting peewee.
Yeah, I mean, I think we do more damage to can't miss kids than we help the late bloomer, in my opinion. I think that's where, that's can't miss kid. That kid's going to be so and so. Then we all of a sudden we start intervening, and we try to say, oh, well, I'm going to help make that kid where get where he wants to go, and whether that player just doesn't want to get there or doesn't know how to get there, and to Adrian's point, didn't have the tools and didn't have the support structure. And I mean, it sounds like Adrien, it sounds like you I mean, in a kind of a positive way, you navigated that world where you must have had really good people recruiting you and asking you to play for them because they didn't manipulate the situation. It sounds like they let you develop in your own time frame, and they took the skills that you had and worked them within the structure of who their team was, and being good people overall, right? And I don't think now that we're getting into these situations with kids getting recruited. I mean, I was just with a panel a couple of weeks ago where there were the family advisors speaking with 9 and 10-year-old parents, seriously talking to them like there's a plan for you. And I'm like, that's tough, but it's but again, yeah, I think we know that. I think at 13, 14, and it's not an untrue statistic. That's when people decide they don't want to play. And then it's also the time when players decide, I want to play, like I want this, and that's great. Those are the best ones.
Can I pause here? I guess I'm lost. 9 and 10-year-olds with a family advisor? You could
That's
explain
another
that.
episode. We're gonna go. That's a different
I
episode.
want to
I
make
can't get
sure
into
I
that.
heard
You
that
know who
right.
you
'Cause
are.
I thought,
We
did
know who
he
you
just
are.
say 9 and 10-year-olds with a family advisor?
Well,
Seriously?
technically, we're family advisors for 9 and 10-year-olds with the
No,
podcast.
no.
Well, that was. I mean,
You don't
nobody got my joke on the panel, but I'm like, your family advisor is your family.
Yeah,
Like that's
right.
who your family advisor is. I mean, so, but I think it's
totally get that. Okay.
yeah, but I think it's I think what we're all doing is professionalizing kids earlier and earlier and earlier and earlier. And I mean, obviously Adrien does this, Lee does this every day with the groups he works with. That's a huge piece of the puzzle of development, right? Because all that other stuff it actually affects your kids in a much more negative way than a positive way for the most part. Again, there are the players, we know that, we see them every day. Adrien, you probably played with a million guys. You're like, oh, this kid's not miss, no miss. This kid's he's gonna be in the NHL, and you're probably the only kid in your whole team that's played the NHL. So it's just you drive it, and I think that's a great story that you're the one that found a way to get outside, play, explore, find your own game, and so I think I do appreciate the fact that there's a little bit of naiveness there in your family, right? That it may have helped you. Who knows?
Well, I compare it, if you know the Finnish school system, what ended up happening is they were way behind, in terms of stat, and they thought outside the box, and luckily, not having the pressure, what they did is they started letting children be children, for a longer period of time. So go out in nature, explore that, just let our natural connection to nature, to life, just unfold as it is without manipulation. And all of a sudden, there's no exams before, I think before the age of 12 or 11. And then what ended up happening is their school system, like the marks and in terms of international performance, they just went right up. So I do think that's real proof of then you're trying to put an agenda, and you're not allowing kids to develop. Because when you think about it, a child learns to walk, learns to speak, no one's telling him to do any of those things. And I'm a true believer that needs to, you need to create a solid foundation, and that's a child's essence, that he feels, I know myself, and then from that place, what helped me is I always had the passion, so if I didn't have it, I don't think I would have put in as much time, and I would have been drawn into, because I did grow up in circumstances that weren't always easy. And I think the fact that hockey was my sort of escape, where I could forget everything. That's what kind of kept me, in a good place. And so to say, everybody's story maybe is a little bit different, but I do think that makes a lot of sense to me. Let kids, develop, and then, once you get to a certain age, like Lee said, 14, 16, then you can start, implementing, just thinking about what's the future ahead, and talking about that and preparing them for that life, because it's not all rosy, and there's things that you need to know, and it's not just going out and playing the game of hockey like you did as a kid.
Adrien, you just said something again I want to tap on. And again, I do want to actually get into your international hockey career, but as the show goes, you say things and I like to kind of pull threads. You said, I know myself. I knew myself. Now, look, any teenager, any young adult, they're finding out who they are. And I think one of the things that we don't focus on enough is that we inadvertently are telling kids, hey, you're a hockey player. That's who you are. And your life and your success and your failures are based on the score or the outcome or how hard you work today. And what ends up happening is, and I've seen this, and it's rough. You get sometimes an 18 to 22-year-old who is so burnt out and they don't know who they are. And their whole life is wrapped up in the success of the game. And I don't believe the success of the game comes from that. I think that, especially in the interviews we've done and the people we've spoken to, the people that really do find success in the game, like yourself, know who they are. And they have an understanding of community and giving back and gratitude. And again, look, it's not every single athlete that's ever played pro sports, obviously. But I find this to be common across people that have succeeded. It wasn't so much forced on them. You know, they were given good ideals at home. So can we just talk for a quick minute or two about maybe from a teenage point of view where that is still developing and what parents and coaches can do to help these children, and they are children at that age, we forget that sometimes, discover themselves?
I guess in many ways, it's like giving them the options. I love when I hear kids trying different sports, through developing skills, because every sport allows you to develop different skills. So everything that you can use, but also, I think having friends and a real family, a family life, I think that's really so important. And so I have to say, in my story, what held me back somewhat is that I did not completely know myself. Like I knew that I loved hockey and that was sort of my escape. But I also felt that, I wanted to please so much, that was kind of my pattern. So it's like, instead of, going out there and playing the game, you're like distracted by, oh, what's he think of me? What's that person think of me? So I think the biggest thing I believe is like creating stability within the home life where, well, I just feel, so comfortable. I can talk about everything, because in hockey, you're going to fail a lot, a lot more than succeed. And so, being able to be open and share those things, be vulnerable, and especially in my time, guys, boys were not really, you were told this is how a boy behaves. And but I think just being able to express yourself and creates a sort of, you feel strong because you're not, holding stuff in. If I look at my life, I tended to suppress a lot of stuff. And I think my experience was performance anxiety. It was because I felt like I can't share like what's going on inside me. And so imagine like a pressure cooker, you're keeping everything bottled down and then it's going to come out some way. So I think home life is huge, and having really good friends, that's so important. Community, and then obviously a coach that brings, especially in those early years, that makes the game fun. Like I did have luckily some coaches who made it so fun. And I recall like 6:30 a.m. practice. I was there at 5:30. I was the Zamboni. I knew he'd done the ice. The lights were on. I said, like, let's go. And my dad was like, really nice enough to bring me because I think he saw how invested I was in hockey.
Adrien, I want to ask this too now. You're an international hockey person, right? You've been in many different places. I'm watching this documentary on Netflix right now about Schwarzenegger. It's just called Arnold. It's really good, right?
Good.
Christy, have you been seeing that too?
My husband watched it and gave it a great review. He was
Yeah.
talking about it before. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that stuck out to me on it, and I'm going to kind of reverse this into a question, was that, Arnold's from Austria. He loves Austria, but he talks about the mentality of Austria kind of in his youth, and that it wasn't, you don't go become a bodybuilder, you don't go have dreams. And he knew that to come to America or North America, that's where dreams could happen, right? But he always kept his roots in Austria. He goes back there all the time. And it made me think that I was fortunate enough to live overseas for many years and to see a different perspective, right? Now, you spent 11 years playing in Switzerland in a pro league over there. So my question to you is, I'm interested in what, from a worldview, did that open you up to? What are the things that you saw that maybe people who have never left North America don't see, that you learned from? And this can go both ways. It's things that you saw in North America that's not over there, but also the worldly view of being in another country and playing hockey in another country. I love that you said earlier that the NHL seemed slow to you when you got back, because we kind of have this probably not unfair balloon view of the NHL, but that's not the only way hockey's played. And when you watch international competition today, it's a different game in a lot of ways, right? So there's a lot of information there, but I'm always interested in perspectives from people who have played, lived, married overseas, and how that can impact our audience.
Well, for sure. First of all, the NHL has changed now. There's, I would have been way more suited. We had hooking and holding, and referees let that go slashing. So I was like, I was a skilled player, but I had to fight Marty McSorley. Well,
A lot of people did. Yeah.
So like I was like right in between really being skilled. I had like, 30 points in the NHL as a D-man. I'd be high ticket right now. So
Cale Makar level. Yeah.
No, well, maybe not Cale, but there's a lot of great, what they're looking for now is puck moving defensemen. So I wasn't, it's whether you're either a top OD or you're gonna slug it out, cross check guys. So I think the game now is probably faster, and so there was a lot of holding, slowing down. So when I went to the Olympics, big rinks, you had the best of the rest of the world. Like, you had Zubov, Malahov, who played there. You had Bykov, who's a legend in Russia as well. So the game was quick, and I just, you play fast, and then you get into the environment like soon after, and you go, wow, I have time, like I didn't feel under pressure and I had time. And so the environment's so important in, allowing, these skills to flourish. But what I learned in Europe is that, I guess in Canada, school, balance life was not really, you played junior, you went to university. Looking back, I think I wasn't really mature enough. Like 18, you're playing with 30-year-olds, 32-year-olds in the NHL. And, looking back, I would have said that if I stayed, in school till I was 22, let just you develop, you mature. I think that would have benefited me. And I think certain NHL teams are good at recognizing that, whether a player is ready or not mentally, because you're thrown into an 82-game schedule where you're going to get beat up. It's a grind. So recognizing, which young players are ready for that. And in terms of Switzerland, they mix. They're not just solely focused on hockey. They're already thinking about, even some guys are working a little bit, even playing pro. So they're kind of thinking already, what's after hockey. And Simon Sinek, is it Simon Sinek?
Simon Sinek, yeah, I know you're right.
Sinek,
Yeah.
So he talks about something really interesting that touched me, is that hockey, like pro athletes struggle. A lot of them struggle because they just know hockey and everything's about them. It's all about you. It's all about, what can you do for me so I have a great career? And what he says is that sense of community, not everybody, creates it, depending on, how you grew up. Some do naturally. So they have all these connections afterwards. I didn't. So you're thrown into, this other life where I could be, selfish, but now I have to bring value. I have to learn new skills. And so he talked about a quarterback who knew that. He realized that his days playing in the NFL, I can't remember the name. It's really an interesting conversation. He talked about, he used his career to create his platform, realizing that, that's just something he does, and the way he's going to impact, thousands of people is after, and so he's already has this bigger vision of what he's trying to do, and football was just a small part of it. So I think, having that guidance, and people see, because you're what ends up happening as a pro athlete, you're so, shiny object is like, oh, I can be a star, there's money, and you think that's going to last forever, but like anything, it doesn't. And then, like, have you done anything, have you built something, while you're in the prime, while you're able to influence? So now I find myself like, really, I have to, find new resources, bring value in a different way. So really reinventing myself, and it's hard work. Um, and you can see why a lot of athletes struggle after, their careers.
You
That's
know,
interesting.
one of the things we've discussed on the show before is these kind of three pillars, not to keep you from being depressed, but when you start to have a lack of these three things, that's when depression sets in. And those three things are, you just tapped on one of them, is community. The other two are purpose and identity. And I think what happens with our young athletes sometimes is we get so wrapped up, all three, into just the game. And then, Adrien, as you just said, the game goes away at some point for all of us, right? Or the ability to make a living in the game goes away, right? I don't think the game ever leaves us, to be fair. But the community you make both in and outside of hockey is very important. We talked before about identity and not having it only wrapped in to, I am a hockey player. It's, I am a son, a daughter, a person. I have other interests. And then purpose, which is something that I know you have found here recently with your work now as a life coach and a coach, a mental fitness instructor. I mean, the list kind of goes on. I know that you and I believe heavily in certain methodologies that can help athletes and other people get present. And then in giving them and helping them find the tools to do so. I'm interested about, how did you discover that side of the journey, right? And then I do want to dive into your tips for parents, coaches, and athletes from a mental standpoint now, right? And it goes so far beyond hockey. It affects every aspect of your life. But there was a clear turn, it seems, with you into this field at a point in your life. Tell us about how that happened.
Well, I think, like anything, they say that your struggle, ends up the thing that kind of you're looking for solutions. So naturally, the times that I did get into flow in my career was, most of the time I really struggled with, like, being able to relax. And so I think the nervous system, the way it's wired, especially in our younger years, like my parents, I love my parents. We grew up in survival because they have a history, like in Yugoslavia, there was all these wars, and like that's how they grew up. So life was like freaking surviving, is you got to survive. So when your nervous system is wired like that, you're like, it's just, you just feel a little bit different. So I always kind of said, I'm doing what I love. Like, why am I not relaxed? Why can't I just, like, I knew that somewhere I should be enjoying this more. And so that kind of put me on a quest of, like, what can I do to quieten the mind, but also the nervous system, because I think it's really so much of that. And positive intelligence, the saboteurs, is, as we call them, is all these adaptive patterns that we pick up in childhood. And we're adapting, we're we feel like it's a place of fear, of lack, and so we're like, oh, I got to be super, perform like super, and it's never good enough. Like, you can imagine where that's going to lead,
Mhm.
or that kid who's avoiding, like, oh, I have these feelings and here these thoughts. So I'm not going to engage as much. So there's all these things that are happening unconsciously. And so I think, building what you said is like the human, like, making sure that there's a solid foundation. And from that place, I mean, you can enjoy your life. Hockey is part of life and you're supposed to enjoy it. Doesn't mean it's always going to be easier, but you're going to be able to put it in perspective and you're going to be able to reach out. You're not going to feel alone. And so my journey kind of took me everything from mindfulness to, understanding. And, I had, some interesting things happen in life too. And maybe, I don't know if this is a part of what I share, but I think I'm really open about my story. I had a brother who took his life, at a fairly, at 25, I was 27, and I was trying to build an NHL career. So just understanding that this place inside you, that has to be good, when that's good, when you're in a good place, then you're just going to be able to navigate, make good decisions. So I think, yeah, and in the performance becomes, it's easier to get yourself into a place. It's easier to bounce back from a bad game versus I remember sometimes it took me like, I would make a mistake or, something was written in the papers and I go, man, it's still in there. Like I go, what's going on? So you're going like, can I let that go? And that letting go process just happens naturally, but it's very much to do with your inner beliefs, and those are kind of hiding. Most people don't know what their, beliefs are. Is like somewhere I feel lack, I feel I'm not good enough. And that's kind of running the show, operating from, back there. And you're not really noticing, you're simply reacting to the emotions it's creating, the thoughts that it's bringing forth. So I think definitely there's so much we can do, for young kids. Just teach them like, hey, it's okay. You learn strategies and learn that, sometimes thoughts, you don't have to, get so caught up in them and create. I love that is, what is it from the book, The Search for Meaning? Viktor Frankl, he goes between stimulus, there's space, there's a space, there's the response. The more space there is between stimulus, the more you can respond the way you want to. And I think that's so key, teaching kids, to be more mindful and to kind of understand their emotions, their thoughts, and give them tools that they can, navigate. Because hockey, like many sports, it's like quick. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to lose games that are close. You're going to, cost a game. And how do you bounce back and feel like, hey, my self-worth is kind of, I feel solid, it's untouched. Okay, I'm disappointed, I might be down, but that self-worth, that foundation remains untouched.
And maybe we can talk a little more about that. Go ahead, Mike, you're laughing.
No, just like I'm like it's so frustrating. I don't mean to interrupt you, but what's on my head here, like when you hear Adrien speak and when you hear a lot of these really great athletes that we've had on and motivational professionals that work in this every day, and then you leave, a bunch of yahoos like me coaching kids, that aren't like professionally trained, to understand what a child's mind and emotions go through. That's the last thing we need to do, is work on power plays and penalty kills in education. And it's more all of this. And I'm a, coaching education geek. I mean, I've done all my USA lacrosse, USA hockey, USA soccer, baseball. Like, I just love hearing like all the other educational institutions in sport and how they teach for the fundamentals. Right. But all of that really goes out the window when, Adrien, you said it, that you can't even let go of a bad play from 4 games ago that you're still thinking about it because somebody else brought it up and they're in your head and you're in your head. And I think that neutrality of learning that the past is the past and the future doesn't matter. You're in now, like right now we're in a neutral space that you control. Many of us as coaches in youth programs aren't equipped to even understand that piece. And I think that's where, we have this huge disconnect in the educational piece of teaching our kids, because we could do all this other stuff. And I just wonder how many kids we're missing on a daily basis from reaching their own potential, because we don't even know how to spot that.
Right. And even with parents too, because I got to be honest with you, when we first started in hockey, I had no idea what an emotional roller coaster we were going to be riding. The highs can be so high and the lows can be so low. And within a day, you might have the worst game in your life and the kids feel like crap. And then the next hour or two, they play another game and they're super high. Nobody really prepares you for that too. Even from the parent side of it.
Yeah, for sure. I think one part too is like, where I think especially I see this when you're young, playfulness is so important, like maintaining that playfulness, because playfulness is like, that's the sort of the muscle. It's everything grows in playfulness. It's that fertile ground. It's that there's so many positive emotions, and in that place everything can kind of flourish. And obviously, as you get older, you have to get more pro routines and that. But when I look at we talked about Yager, like why he played so long is because like I see the kid's still in him. Gretzky was a lot like that. So I think that playfulness is really, it's so huge. When it starts getting serious way too young, oh my God, that's a recipe. That's a disaster waiting to happen. Something will go, so, and give you an example in Belgium, like, they, with soccer or football, as they call it, they did something really interesting. They were, dropping in terms of, talent and performance and world stage. And so they started creating smaller fields. So playing less kids. So 2-on-2, 3-on-3. So more touches, more fun. And all of a sudden they started, developing. So at the end of the game, at the end of the day, sports is a great teacher. It's a great way for kids to develop, regardless whether, they make it to the top. It's who makes it, 1-2%. So using like what do I learn from playing sports, and keeping it really organic, especially early on. You're getting in touch with your senses. Hockey
That's
is
so true. Yeah.
your hands, your feet. You're learning all this, and being able, to see. And I recall when I played, and I was, too anxious. My vision, just like everything, looking down, and you can tell, and you go, how do I get myself out of that place? And so I think a lot of it is just teaching them to relax, even though they might be a little bit anxious, and it's all right. And so you can, start using breathing, early on, teaching kids. I do breath. I have a meditation practice. And I think as I get older, it's more and more, because I realize that it's such a fundamental part of being healthy. So yeah, I don't know what the initial question, because I went.
It's
just
I guess the question is, what advice would you give to parents who are just starting out in this journey, and they're not prepared for this emotional roller coaster? I love the idea of introducing the breathing and the meditation, because none of that was ever an option for us. Nobody ever talked about that when we started our hockey journey.
It still barely is, Christy, just so you know.
Yeah,
When I introduce that to
exactly.
teams, they go, you want to do what? I'm like, just trust me. You want to do
let's
what?
talk about that. Yeah, how much of a difference can that make? For not even just the kid, but just for the parents who go crazy in the stands.
Sure. Yeah, because they're so kind of attached. And like I said, I think the biggest piece is be there, support the kids, playfulness. Like, okay, like, and then, talk about, get the kids to open up about the experience of losing, of winning, even if you score 3 goals of a game, 3 goals in a game, and then the next game, you're still on that, you're not gonna be present. And I think what Mike said is that that's the goal, is that life happens in the present moment. So if you're like dragging stuff, from the past into the future, you're not fully present. So I think ultimately you're like, make the experience the focus, the main focus, and teach kids how, like, what do you need to be totally present for this experience. So playfulness is huge. Like, I'm big, it's a game, and then within that playfulness, if that's there as a foundation, I think a lot of good things happen. And then you can teach them, um, you have a bad shift, you're frustrated, like, get back to the bench and, just you can grab your stick and breathe a few times. That could be an anchor. And you knowing that you're going to be out there in 30 seconds. So from that place where you're totally frustrated, like, you're going to be one step behind, you're not going to be in a state to react, because hockey happens so quickly. So, kind of, help, I guess coaches can help that way. But yeah, just for parents, I think just really supporting. And I think a lot of parents just, get caught up in this short vision, and everything's taken out of context, when really it's a long ride to get to, even if you go pro, it's about, being consistent and creating the environment where a kid can be, totally himself and be consistent. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's
I think Adrian, I think for our families, right, and the people that we tend to speak to and speak with, and kind of really revolve around kind of this podcast and the youth level, is to almost be the advocate back to the organization that this is what's important. Like, I don't need another power skating clinic. I need this. Like, and we can do this as, it's so hard for a parent to be alone on an island and say, oh, my kid's going to do, visualization training and motivational breathing. And like, that's really difficult for an 11, 12, 15-year-old child to be in a room doing that, like before a game, when it's the right thing to do.
Right.
And everybody else like, what the hell's wrong with this kid? And who do these parents think they are? Like, that's what happens. And I think so I always advocate that that's why we want to do it as a team. Now, whether every team member utilizes it or not, that's another story. But if we looked at this as a practice, like if we taught it as a way of in our development structure, it doesn't become foreign. It becomes practice. It becomes part of your development. And I think what happens, most people I know where we are, see it as, oh, that's what that one family's doing that thinks their kid's going to go pro. Well, no, the kid's doing it so that they can enjoy the sport, but we're doing it because we want to have a better team. If you want to be the best teammate, you have to be your best self, right? And then if you could be your best self, you can now contribute to the team. So I think it's just it's a funny thing how we look at these non-on ice activities and don't see them as or more important than the time we spend on the ice. And that playfulness and free play and the freedom to explore the game is actually where the best players in the world develop. And we don't see that because nobody's watching the kid in the park, and nobody's watching the kid go to the tennis courts that are frozen and demanding they go out there and skate. They're just doing it. And I think that's so I would implore the people that listen to you and the people that were on this, that work with Lee, and that be the advocate for this, because if it helps your kid and you can help your child help the rest of the team, it helps your kid. right? So if you want your team to be successful and you want your kid to get noticed, then help your team. And that's the sport we're in, unless you're going to go play tennis or golf or something like that.
That is the piece that is missing consistently. It really is.
No.
I agree.
Well, because it's for us. It's me. Like, I'm going to do this for my kid. But yeah, but your
Exactly.
kid can't be successful without the team being successful. That's what's great about our sport. I mean, that's what's great about hockey. Is
What
that
are you
I wanna
talking
be,
about, Mike? What
I
are
wanna
you
be
what are you
successful.
talking about, man? The hot shot with the 10 goals. That's the kid. No, go ahead, Adrian.
I get
Sorry.
it. Yeah. But Adrian, sure show. So yeah, I agree. But I think that's just like that. Those kind of things that you can like that you see, and maybe really talk about, like, because you're in Europe and you're in you're in like these Scandinavian countries, that you see it, right? You see it at the way
Right.
the children are worked with at the youngest levels. And the sad part is, like, where I am right now in Norway and talking to Norwegian hockey, they want to be like they're trying to make things faster. They're trying to make all-star teams earlier. I'm like, no. This is where you don't go down this route. Like the ability to just
Play.
be a player and be with your friends and enjoy coming to the rink and having that is really what the secret sauce is. That's why a town of 400 people can produce NHL hockey players, and they can be successful.
And you said something interesting about, visualization, all related to imagination. I
Mm.
mean, kids are, what is it? Einstein said, like, imagination's more valuable than knowledge, because whatever we create, I remember when I used to go to the rinks, I imagined me being in front of 20,000 people. No one was telling me do that because I watched Hockey Night in Canada. And I think somewhere I was planting seeds, in my mind, and how, it all works. So I think that, especially, and what I found in hockey, we used to have, like, drills, when I think back, and there's 10 kids in line and one's doing the drill and they're all sitting there and waiting. And I go, oh my God, like, creativity, throw a puck out there, let them, figure out, let them, like, as they learn to walk, as, toddlers, they're going to learn to play hockey. So those first few years should be like, man, touch the puck, skate, like, have fun, create that environment where, everybody's excited. Oh, I have hockey today. I have hockey today.
Mhm.
Imagine that, what would happen. I guarantee you there's a lot of good stuff that would happen. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I think Finland, and, they're really good at recognizing, what is, when do you introduce something, because even, when they do, deadlifts and these major squats, the movements, where I see a lot of kids, they're playing high levels, but they haven't even learned a movement pattern like squatting. And so the Finns and Swedes, I find, are really advanced in that they teach them, the body movement patterns, which are like, those are that's how we move. Those are the movements that are important to life, and even as you get older. So these things still serve me as I'm still, moving to stay young. So I think they're really good at putting those in place. So I hope I answered your
Oh,
question.
you did, Adrian. Look, I got a whole page of notes here that I want to get over, because and for those of you listening, not watching this, there's a lot of passion coming through in Adrian's face when we talk about this, and not that you didn't have that when you talked about your NHL career, but I guarantee you the faces that you're making visually right now are the same ones you were making on the tennis courts as a kid. You can see the passion coming through. Going back to that Arnold documentary, you kind of just talked about this, and I'm going to say what he said. You got to keep in mind that this is Schwarzenegger talking, so he's always very forthright. But he said, "Dreams are bullshit. Vision is everything." And what he was trying to say was that it's not enough just to have a dream. You have to visualize it. And it's funny you talked about 20,000 people, Adrian, because he talked about standing on a stage as a kid, thinking about 20,000 people watching him win Mr. Universe. And then it happened. And then he visualized being the best movie star. And then it happened. And then he visualized being, and then it happened. He visualized it. He didn't just think it. So that's important. A few minutes ago, though, Adrian, you said something very, very profound. And I want to repeat it because it kind of was like almost a light bulb type statement for me. You said, everything grows in playfulness. It's fertile ground. Man, that is a great quote. And I want to make sure that everyone listening equates this well beyond hockey. You know, in my work, whether it's with businesses, nonprofits, doctors, hockey players, this is true in every environment. When I work with a stagnant business, that's what's missing. There's nothing fun about it. There's no play. And you know what's funny is we'll go in, Adrien will do a really simple team building exercise, have them smile. And all of a sudden they want to be at work the next day, right? Now, the misconception is we do this one time and everything's fixed, right? You have to consistently and constantly be, implementing.
I did breathing yesterday. I did it.
Yeah. Look, Mike, to your point, I was going to say this too. I wrote this down. We talk about the mental fitness and we talk about all the work that we do with teams and Adrien, for your for your knowledge here, it's like, we do breathing exercises with young teams. We do lots of team building. Mike, I've never had a team. This is for everybody listening. I've never had a team come back to me at the end of the season or the end of a session and go, boy, that was a waste of time. I really wish we were working on the power play instead of that. No one has ever said that to me, at least not to my face. I should say it like that. Right. This stuff works. And Mike, I find in the line of work, and Adrien, I'm sure you do too, is that the stigma that surrounds it, the way I actually have to almost convince teams is, hey, you'll win more. Now, it depends how you define the word winning, but you'll win more if your kids do this. That's how I get attention typically. And then once we dive in, I think, in Adrien, I'm going to talk about positive intelligence in a second. The world kind of opens up and you realize, like, look, winning the game is really not the goal. It's a goal amongst many goals, right? So for Mike and Christy, I wanted to bring this up. Adrien and I are both in a program with positive intelligence, and you brought up before, I think this is important, we discuss this, saboteurs, right? And I kind of equate them to kind of the pressure voices in your head. We all have them. Adrien, you said it right. They're developed in our youth, and they come in different forms. For example, you gave some examples earlier. Mine was restlessness. Right. Whereas I always have to be on to the next big thing and my brain is pushing me, go to the next thing, find the next thing. And it's funny because you don't realize that's a saboteur. In fact, that for many years of my life, I thought this was just a great driving force that I don't stop. And I realized I was never present. I was always to the next thing. And when I became conscious of that, and there's other saboteurs that again, for those of you listening, you can find these things that you have. When you become conscious to them, then you can switch, Adrien, to the SAGE mindset. And you can't see this, Adrien. I'm in my office right now. I have the SAGE perspective poster up on my wall, and I always have it there. And in short, for everybody listening again, and Mike and Christy, the SAGE perspective is how can I turn, negatives into positives in my mind? I was at, this is a funny timing on this. Mike convinced me to go to the USA Hockey goaltending coaching course yesterday. I am now a bronze goaltending coach somehow. I don't know how that happened.
Congratulations.
I would never call myself a goalie coach, but I got it. But one of the things that one of the coaches said yesterday, Mike, was every goal against is a gift. And that was a SAGE mindset of if it goes in the net, you can learn from it, right? They're not all going to be pretty. And some of them are going to be more obvious than others, but it's, can you take the goal against and learn every time? It's a gift.
Yeah.
I am, just like you, Adrien, I'm so passionate about teaching this to our youth and adults for that matter, but the youth take to it. We need to be implementing these methodologies into the younger audience because we're doing the opposite. All right. And just to give a kind of a rounding out to this, you can see at the NHL level, the teams finding success right now are being coached by individuals who seem to understand this. They want it to be playful. They want it to be fun. They understand it's a job, but you can see it in Colorado, in Tampa Bay, right? In Vegas. The coaching style is let's enjoy this together. That is a lot different than the way things were done when I was a kid, Adrien, when you were a kid. All right. With kind of some of these old school coaches. But with that said, and this is why I do what I do. Adrien, this is probably why what you do. We just saw a Russian player take his own life last week at 22 years old or less, I believe. I was on the ice the other week with my daughter, and we were it's a stick and puck, and she was just, making snow angels and having a good time. And, I kept this in our little space. And at the other end of the ice, I'm not kidding you, Mike, this would have pissed you off, is I'll say a tier 1 coach with obviously his kid. He's screaming at his kid, and his kid is screaming back. And this is a stick and puck. And I'm sitting there watching. I'm like, what the hell are you guys doing? Like, neither one of you wants to be here. Right. And so I still see this stuff. And those were saboteurs on both ends with that father and that son just colliding over and over and over again. No consciousness. Now, I try and approach that with grace too. If like, I'm not going to go up to those guys on the ice and say, hey, I don't want you to be conscious, but I hope for those two, right? Like, I hope they can discover this as a community. And Adrien, this is me turning this into a question now. Obviously, I get passionate about this too. As a community, we can commit to these ideologies. If you're listening to this show, you obviously believe in it because we talk about it all the time. But it is so important that you give yourself grace with this process of being present. Your mind is wired to not stay in the present moment. It wants to explore. As you said, Adrien, wants to be creative. But you talked about, if you can find that gap, bring it in and become present and not worry about the past and not worry about the future, man, solutions just present themselves. Right? If those, I used to call them negative voices. I call them pressure voices now. If they hijack your mind, you're not going to be able to make great decisions. Right? So, Adrien, I guess I'm throwing it back to you for more of a comment when it comes to the game. But I see this, it's still prevalent. Mike made the great point before of there's this stigma. If I go to a team and say, no, I'm a mental skills coach, they go, yeah, but what is that going to do? What is that going to do for us? Right? I just would love your general thoughts on this.
Well, I totally agree. I mean, in terms of turning a negative into a positive. So I do think, some, the hot stove, the hand on the hot stove, you can be frustrated, and be there for a second. That could be a driving force, and you could feel, angry because, maybe you're not showing up the way you wanted, but ultimately that has to lead you to a place of expansion. Expansion to me is that's where you're going to play your best. If you're contracted, forget about it. Everything's slower. Your muscles are responding, but your vision's impaired. So it's really about, realizing, okay, you can experience that, but how do you step into a state where you feel empowered, where you're going to make progress? And that's all about expansion. So I think that's really important, and realizing that most kids put enough pressure on themselves. So if there's pressure plus pressure from the outside, imagine someone, like you said, a young kid at 22 taking his life. Like, that's crazy. Imagine what's going on in someone's head, to be able to do that. So realizing it's really our responsibility to understand. You said something really that touched me. Yeah, it's a business, there's got to be a level of professionalism, but that in itself is the bigger picture, is life. That is all within life. And what's life? Life is, I mean, if you're not waking up feeling good, empowered, happy, experiencing joy, whatever you do, it's just not going to feel the same way. So we have to get them to get excited about life. Okay, this is a part of life, and that's how we should teach hockey, like part of life, something that can help you evolve, even raise your consciousness level, So, in terms of like, hey, okay, I felt anger, I saw it, I saw it, and I grabbed it, and I said, okay, cool, I can handle that.
Call it out. Right.
I'm gonna turn it into something. I'm gonna use that energy, of getting angry, frustration, and I'm gonna turn it and be a sort of, what do they say, alchemist. You'll turn it into something, and you'll use that energy, and you're gonna step on them, next time on the ice, and you're going to make a great play. You're going to have this surge of energy. So teaching them those principles of life, because we're playing the game of life, hockey's, just one of the things, and that's always changing.
And you
So
can be playful with that too. The game of life, right? You know,
Well, and
absolutely.
that's Lee's
yeah.
point too. It's going to help you win. Like, like we tell the kids all the time, like, which wolf are you going to feed today? Like, you're going to feed that
Oof,
that negative, horrible, self-defeating wolf, or you're going to feed the good wolf. Like, and I think it's like, but if parents and coaches understood that it's not like voodoo, it's actually how you're going to win. Like, it's the better way. It's the better way to learn and win.
Well, and Mike, I want to add this too. And Adrien, this is the one that I find is the stigma with what we do. Is there's this misconception that if you're present and peaceful, you will lose your competitiveness. And it is quite the opposite. All right. I've always been competitive. I've had more success with that competitiveness being present than when I felt like I needed to be angry to succeed. Or as you said, I wasn't an alchemist, right? I didn't use the energy efficiently. And I have become more competitive in a positive way since being present than when I wasn't. And here's the thing, and this is how I also break the stigma, because that's just my word. Who am I, right? If you look at the greatest of all time, most of them had an ability to be present better than anybody. We talked about Schwarzenegger, very present person. Kobe Bryant, very, very present person. And they've talked about this. They success leaves clues, right? I remember in the Michael Jordan documentary, right? The Last Dance. I said it. The most important part of that documentary was not that the Bulls won that last championship. It was people, his teammates said in the documentary, he is the most present person I have ever met. He's also probably the greatest competitor in modern history in sports. It's there, my friends. the clues are there. The success stories are there. All right. And you know what? The funny part about it is there are so many examples of people that are not present failing at the highest levels that it makes you wonder in the first place of why are we subscribing to that over and over again? And look, the answer is this. We're just learning about the mind now. This is a really recent discovery when you think about it, right? In terms of, like my mind is a muscle and I can train it. And this will be kind of my last question for Adrien, because I'm hogging all the mic time here. But one of the keys we didn't talk about here is this. We're talking about the importance of mindfulness, the importance of being present. We did not talk about the importance of practicing it, right? And it is such a key part of it is you don't just achieve mindfulness and you have it. You're not just present all the time, and probably unless you're like a Buddhist monk sitting on a mountain not speaking somewhere, which is, again, no offense to them, that's not going to be me. I don't necessarily want that life. But this is something, and this is the course that you and I take, or the certification that we have, is to consistently and constantly practice this multiple times a day. And I'm at a place with it, and Adrien, I don't want to speak for you. I'm at a place with it where I've been doing it for over a couple of years now, that it's natural to me now to just snap my fingers and, okay, I'm going to be present for 2 minutes. And man, the power of that, what that has done for me personally, professionally, with my family, with my kids, has been life-changing for me. Right. And I'm curious if you're having the same experience. And then also, how do you practice your mindfulness every day?
Well, I think, so well put. What I love saying is, we all have an essence to us, like a nature, and, just like you were 5, 10, and now you're older, like which version of you is real? Well, they're all, that essence. And when you do those reps, you're kind of connecting to that essence. I love to return, you said, like, competitiveness, because you hear that has to look a certain way. You don't know what's happening inside of someone. He might be like, so I love this. I'm like, and a perfect example is Bruce Lee. I love using Bruce Lee. Like, you're talking about, just delivering a punch. It's not like wasting all your energy. It's like being really intentional. And it's really almost to the point where you're feeling the energy, so I think there's a real art to it, really sensing. And so it's really, to me, it's like getting in touch with that essence, and your inner resources, and what's that feel like? Can you, make that come alive and see how that shows up? And so like I said, it's not the one making the most noise. It's the one who has, the ability to focus when everybody's like totally distracted, when, they're down 2 goals and, there's someone who's saying, okay, I'm good. I'm focused. I know what I need to do. And then all of a sudden, that ability to focus, I think, is so important in life. And there's so many distractions. They even talked about now, there's someone in terms of working with the phones, so you're constantly on your phone being distracted, and that's, taking away from, everything, you moving forward, you being engaged in practice, the way you're showing up. So really recognizing that your attention can be hijacked at all times, especially now. And to me, a sage skill is your ability to focus. It's like, and that is really, I think kids learn, we're examples, so they learn by doing. Just like the lion learns to, there's some instinct to it, but they learn by simply watching. So if we're the example, we can say very little, but we're going to create the environment where, there's going to be success, there's going to be focus, there's going to be calm, there's going to be all the things that you need, I think, to succeed.
Totally agree with all of that. Mike, Christy, I know we're getting short on time. Is there anything else you wanted to ask?
That's great. I mean, I think it's going to become even more challenging as we look at where our kids are headed, and their attention spans are getting even shorter, and the discipline isn't quite what it used to be either. So there are a lot of challenges ahead, and I think if parents can get on board with this philosophy, even if you don't have a bunch of people around you, you're the only one, you're paddling against the stream that's going against you, you're going to benefit from this. So it's fantastic, and I think your timing is perfect, especially now with what our kids are going through.
Yeah, and it wasn't too long ago, guys were, smoking darts in the locker room, between periods. So everybody learned. Yeah, there's always there's evolution, right, of the player and the mind and the body, and we learn that we have to. I mean, we talk about these, great athletes, the Jordans and the Woods and the mental, but Adrien, I mean, you're in a 1%er. I mean, you're in the same boat. I mean, in my opinion, and I look at guys like you and say, okay, there's like 1% less of the population in my world, which is hockey, right? That have played in the stage that you've played in. And if our parents can take just, your experiences and what you're seeing, and the fact that you're around other great athletes and you've seen, listen, I play with some like really great guys, right? And there were a lot of guys that I'm like, I don't even know how they got through the day. Like they just, like, they imagine if you had these tools, when you were 10, 11, 12, and us as parents had the tools that said, hey, just like right now, I mean, I can't imagine a kid going into junior hockey without knowing what the weight room is and having a nutritionist and all that kind of stuff, right? So as we develop this knowledge, I mean, I think, following people like yourself and obviously Lee and knowing that, we can utilize these great resources, that's actually much, much easier to get to now, right? Because it's all here. I mean, this is like, you don't have to explore, you just have to Google. I think it's just an easier way for us to do it, but maybe we have to be off the phone a little longer. Maybe we don't have to Google so much, but get somebody else to tell us. But I think it's great. I really appreciate you coming on, because it just gives a little more inspiration as we go through the summer and into the year, to find out how to put these things to work with our teams.
Can I share one more thing I find is just grab me something I'm learning in the master coaching that I'm doing. I do this, is we talk about making contact. So making contact is like, okay, we see you, I see Lee, but actually, do I really like see, the person? And making contact, we talk about in our coaching circle, is the carrier wave of communication, of so many things, of transformation. So when you see that kid, you see the person, not what you're wanting, what your intellect, what, the agenda is. You actually see, how can I serve that kid? What does he or she need like right now? So you create that contact where you see that, person. And I think like if we, show up in that way, and imagine like even the relationships, the level of trust that there's going to be, and these kids will go, they'll do everything when they feel like, wow, this person cares about me. But it's not just kids, it's adults as well. So I want to put that piece of like really connecting, like connecting with, those kids, whatever you're doing in coaching, and, drop the agenda a little bit and create that contact, and then you'll see amazing things will happen.
I think, Adrien, to your point, if you do that, you're coaching a human being. If you don't do that, you're just coaching a hockey player, right?
There you go.
And great coaches, not limited to hockey, create better people. And we say on the show all the time, great people become great players, not the other way around, right? Great player doesn't mean you're going to be a great person. Adrien, you're a great person. I want to tell everybody, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure you follow Adrien on LinkedIn. Last name Plavsic. All right. Adrien, is there other places people should go? I mean, you put some great content on LinkedIn. I just didn't know if there was another place.
Yeah, I think right now Beyond Performance is what I'm going to have a website up and running. So I can share that with you. But LinkedIn is the main place I kind of put, my contacts. So you can look at Adrien Plavsic or Beyond Performance, and you'll see me there. And I'm slowly getting active on Facebook and Instagram, but my website is where really I'm going to share what I do. So I'll give you that information if I can, and when it's ready. But I totally appreciate it. It was a real pleasure to exchange.
No, it goes both ways, and I'll say it, an Olympian, a world junior champion, NHLer, but above all, a great human being. That trumps all of those, although those are pretty good credentials there. But that's going to do it for this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey. If you have loved this episode, make sure you give us that 5-star review wherever you're listening. Share it with your friends, put it in your team communication, share Adrien's story with the people out there. We need to get these messages out there. But for Christy Casciano Burns, Mike Benelli, and Adrien Plavsic, I'm Lee Elias. We will see you on the next edition of Our Kids Play Hockey. Make sure to have a great week, everybody. See you soon. We hope you enjoyed this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey. Make sure to like and subscribe right now if you found value wherever you're listening, whether it's a podcast network, a social media network, or our website, ourkidsplayhockey.com. Also, make sure to check out our children's book, When Hockey Stops, at whenhockeystops.com. It's a book that helps children deal with adversity in the game and in life. We're very proud of it. But thanks so much for listening to this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey, and we'll see you on the next episode.